In Gears of War lore, the chief rival power to the coalition of ordered governments was the UIR, the Union of Independent Republics, who, just like the COG, was a global superpower that formed shortly after the imulsion substance was unlocked into a fuel source. They were a collection of nations which shared grievances on their lack of imulsion resource reserves, therefore forming a military, cultural, and economic alliance. The COG has always been at the forefront of the Gears of War story, but it's time you learned the full lore on Sera's other global superpower in the Pendulum War era. As always, I'm your host Abz, and I'll be giving you a full breakdown of the UIR in Gears of War lore, from the society and culture, military, vehicles, troops, member nations, and much more. So without further ado, let's get into this. The national flag of the UIR is a red lightning bolt in a ring flanked by red wings, but this has also seen different colour variations. The nations within the UIR were like-minded. The majority of them were resource-poor nations, lacking imulsion reserves. But since there were many nations, the culture was diverse and varied, however was unified through common grievances against the imulsion-rich members of the COG, such as Tyrus and Kashgur. The UIR's social, cultural, political, and ideological influence was only matched by that of the COG. The Indies strive to outcompete the COG in many scientific advancements, from militarization to even the fields of space exploration. The UIR can be viewed as a loose reference to the Soviet Union, with some of the Indies having Slavic or Eastern European names, as well as the terminology that they use. The largest and highly aggressive leading member of the UIR was the Pele Republic. They, along with the highly developed coastal nation Austria, established the Union of Independent Republics. The republics of Pele and Austria would oppose and dominate other countries, with Austria being a highly developed nation, only matched by the COG nation of Tyrus. And Austria was also the centre of the eventual Hammer of Dawn project. But sometime after the Pendulum Wars had ended, Pele became a COG nation, but the nation, troops, and the last leader of the UIR by the name of Premier Yuri Dushenko were all killed when the Hammer of Dawn was used in the Locust War, with the remains of Austria also being wiped out in the Hammer of Dawn counterattack, as they were Locust-held territories outside the nation of Tyrus. The UIR also included the Independent Republic of Furlin, the Republic of Luxi, and the Indies also occupied the neutral nation of Vaskar as well for a certain amount of time. The Vaskaris were known for their technological expertise and innovation, which motivated the UIR to occupy Vaskar, as well as Vaskar sharing a long border with Kashgur, which worried many in the coalition. The small UIR nation that never surrendered during the Pendulum Wars, and was at the receiving end of a massacre in the early Locust War. This was the homeland to the ruthless and resentful soldier by the name of Garam Paduk. Gorasnaya was a member state of the UIR, and during the 79-year-long war, Gorasnaya troops fought on the Eastern Front, but after the COG and UIR signed the armistice to end the Pendulum Wars, Gorasnaya never surrendered and kept fighting. However, it was only a minor threat to the COG, as they didn't have the firepower required to really challenge. Due to Gorasnaya being economically challenged because of the lack of natural imulsion reserves, Paduk grew to be resentful of the COG and became a patriot for his country and the Union of Independent Republics. Paduk was determined to join the UIR infantry in the Pendulum Wars to defeat the COG, dreaming of obtaining the riches of Tyrus, as the standard of living in Gorasnaya wasn't very impressive. When the Locust Horde invaded the surface of Sera on Emergence Day, the Republic of Gorasnaya was completely devastated at the hands of General Khan and his forces, but Paduk and some of his fellow Gorasnaya were rescued by the COG Navy. However, as his home nation of Gorasnaya refused to surrender at the end of the Pendulum Wars, Paduk was originally considered to be a prisoner of war by the COG. but Paduk demanded that he had a right to fight the Locust and claim revenge for their attack on Gorasnaya. So therefore he became the charter member of the COG's Open Arms program. For the former enemy combatants of the UIR willing to fight the Locust, he became a traitor and joined the COG to become the rank of private. Although he still hated the COG and made no attempts to hide this hatred. The Gorasnaya were also known to torture prisoners of war during the Pendulum Wars, and sent captured Gears to forced labour camps, in which many of them died in, which Paduk seemed to have enjoyed after being questioned about it by Colonel Ezra Loomis. Paduk also wanted to torture General Khan after Khan's shibboleth was defeated and Khan was fatally injured. Now during the Lambent pandemic on the island of Vectus, the COG and Gorasnaya unified against the stranded pirates on the island, but they were forced to abandon Vectus due to repeated Lambent attack and contamination of the land. The COG was forced to disband, and the Gorasnaya decided to go their own way and return to their homeland, and were given the CNV Timgad, which was renamed the General Iga Trescu. The Gorasnaya leader, Commander Miran Trescu, promised to remember the COG's kindness towards them, saying that while his people remember their grudges, they also remember kindness. And the Gorasnaya repaid these favours by helping to end the Locust War in the Second Battle of Azora, when Cole and Baird were sent to find reinforcements and showed up with the Gorasnaya soldiers, led by Trescu in one of the Gorasnaya ships. They lent their aid to Delta Squad on the island, leading to victory and the destruction of the Lambent and the Locust by Adam Phoenix's countermeasure weapon. Now Gorasnaya had a vibrant culture with a lot of pride in the military. The history of their past mighty empire motivated Gorasnayans to exhibit a strong and disciplined personality, being proud to represent their homeland. There was a quote by Commander Miran Trescu in 15 AE that I think really gives an insight into the Gorasnaya's history. So it went like this: "They think we're paranoid. They wonder why we still keep them at arm's length. 5 centuries ago, we won and lost an empire of 400 million citizens. During the Pendulum Wars, Gorasnaya's population fell from 20 million to 10. After E-Day, it was 2 million. After the COG deployed the Hammer of Dawn, we were reduced to 50,000. Now, after the stranded massacres and the famines, and the disease and the cold, there are only 4,000 of us, and they wonder why we always have one eye on the exit." In the COG, the soldiers were called the Gears, and for the UIR, they tended to be named the Indies. The UIR infantry shared similar equipment as COG forces. Both forces used the Pendulum War era Lancers, also known as the Retro Lancers, as their primary weapons. UIR armour is also comparable to COG equivalents in terms of defensive capabilities. However, the UIR also had some of their own signature weapons, most notably the Bushka, a semi-automatic drum-loaded grenade launcher, as well as the Markster semi-auto sniper rifle, which was the UIR's answer to the COG's longshot sniper rifle. Both of these iconic UIR weapons were manufactured and used during the Pendulum Wars. Many UIR infantry formations consisted of different models and types of armour. For every type of armour, there was a male variant and a slimmed down variant as well for the female Indies, but the armour designs as a whole are vastly different to the COG. The most common type of armour in the UIR is the standard issue green armour, better known as the regulator armour. These sets are worn by your standard Indies and has the UIR letters stamped on the chest plate. The emblem of the UIR is found on the left arm and backpack sections of the armour. Some of the regulator variants include a clip-on point for the standard issue UIR combat knife. This is most likely reserved for squad leaders. The backpacks of the armour serve as an ammo pouch for the belt-fed rifle used by the infantry. The UIR regulator helmet, just like how the COG standard infantry helmet sees different variations, the regulator helmet has different variations as well, seen in the comics and games. The UIR had its own corps of officers during the Pendulum Wars to oversee logistics, train the foot soldiers, and lead forces into battle when called upon. And so, the armour worn by the experienced officers of the UIR was a completely different set compared to the regulator variants. It was a much slimmer variant. This could perhaps be for better mobility, but the lighter materials used for this armor set are unknown, so they could be superior materials for all we know. This set piece also has a combat knife attached, with a small cape alongside golden accents, which showcases the officer's superiority compared to your standard indies. A specialised military branch within the UIR were known as the Sandswept, created for desert operations and combat on harsh terrain. As they dealt with harsh desert environments, Sandswept troopers wore lighter armour, which trades overall protection for better heat dispersion. The Sandswept troopers wore ponchos due to the climate, and they were given additional ammo pouches and gear to better survive in dry environments for a longer duration. These UIR soldiers were armed with a multitude of weapons, and the Sandswept unit patch is sewn onto the right shoulder fabric of the armour, with the standard UIR armband being present on the left arm. Another special operations rank within the army were the UIR elites, an elite force of experienced and specifically trained indie soldiers that were the special force of the UIR and were seen as their equivalent to the COG's Onyx Guard. Experienced in unconventional warfare and sabotage, the UIR elites had an interesting armor set. When it came to the Onyx Guard, their armor was head and shoulders above the COG standard infantry armor, but this wasn't the case for the UIR elites armor. The UIR elites armor was actually the exact same as the standard regulator variants, except for one thing: the color, as it is painted in navy blue, along with a white skull at the front with the iconic UIR lightning bolt. Now, there's no official explanation as of now as to why this is, but perhaps the colour and use of the armour may have been a tactical play by the UIR, confusing Gears by perhaps disguising themselves as friendly COG Gears from afar, and maybe being underestimated with their standard looking armour, except the Gears would be in for a surprise, as these UIR elites were highly experienced and not to be messed with. Garen Paduk was a high-ranking soldier within the UIR during the Pendulum Wars. In his early career, he quickly rose to the rank of Major, and therefore had a more specialised, robust armour set. I'm sure there were other, more high-profile armour sets as well, just like his, but Paduk is the main representation of the UIR that we have in the Gears universe. Paduk was known for his hatred for the COG, and participation in the torture of Gears, who had become prisoners of war. Paduk also became one of the best snipers in the UIR infantry.
So, Paduk, are you here as Major Paduk of the UIR, or Private Paduk of the COG?
Whichever one you like less.
The Open Arms program may have given you our uniform, but you and I remain enemies.
Fine. Let's settle this like enemies then.
Hey, that's enough! Stand down. You Gorasnys weren't known for treating prisoners very well. I'm sure you know nothing about it.
Oh, I wouldn't say that.
As part of the UIR's advancements in space research, the UIR space program recruited potential cosmonauts through the UIR Air Force, as distinguished indie pilots were needed in the handling of spaceflight and spacecrafts. These cosmonaut recruits would then be trained in a cosmonaut training facility. UIR cosmonauts wore specifically designed indie armor that were suited exclusively for space travel. These hard-shell spacesuits were bulkier in comparison to the regular UIR armor, and had a completely different helmet, resembling a classical EVA helmet for spacewalks. Now, it is unknown if these cosmonauts carried any weapons, although the presence of UIR propaganda posters depicting a UIR space fleet suggested that the militarization of space was a possibility. Let's firstly look into the ground vehicles that the Union of Independent Republics used throughout their conflicts with the COG in the Pendulum Wars. The UIR Armoured Personnel Carrier, or more commonly known as APC, the main armoured infantry transport vehicle for the UIR during the Pendulum Wars to transport their soldiers. It was their equivalent to the COG's Armadillo and APC. When spotted, the Gears would often just call them trucks. They were seen in key battles, such as the Battle of Rogani in the 62nd year of the Pendulum Wars, in the nation of Kashgur, as well as the more well-known Battle of Ashford Fields. The APC had an armoured hull and was seen to have smoke launchers, but the UIR APCs were often seen to be attached with a bubble-turreted anti-personnel cannon. These vehicles had a half-track profile, so probably not as mobile as the COG armadillos used later on in the Locust War. A variant of the UIR APC, however, was their own medical truck, a much more durable and armoured medical and evacuation vehicle compared to the COG standard ambulances. It has the same chassis as the APC, but has a large back door for taking out medical supplies and injured personnel. The crew would usually consist of combat medics, as well as the driver of course. The UIR's main battle tank was the Paria tank, the main workhorse of the UIR's army, heavily armoured, heavily reinforced, and also equipped with an active protection system that could fend off anti-tank munitions. The Paria tank dealt devastating damage, as it had a Paria cannon that could wipe out COG tanks and centaurs, providing heavy fire support for the Indies. But not only that, the tanks also had a very fast, high caliber minigun that created a huge amount of firepower against the COG. But these tanks had a flaw in their design that made them vulnerable at the rear. This was because they had vents stationed at the back of the tank, which could have grenades or molotovs tossed into them and destroy the tank from within, blowing the tank to smithereens. The UIR had an anti-air tank vehicle, and this was known as the ASP, equipped with self-propelled anti-aircraft guns, missile launchers, and self-protective machine guns. The ASPs were of course heavily armed, and their main purpose was to take out COG attack helicopters or transport carriers. Light armoured vehicles, or LAVs, were one of the main infantry fighting vehicles that the UIR used against the COG, a very durable vehicle used to dish out heavy damage upon the gears, having a large, armoured glass cockpit and a single machine gun turret, as well as having the same track profile as their APCs. The UIR had a rocket transport train, a large carrier train serving their secret cosmodrome in Vaskar, as the UIR planned to win the space race against the COG. This was used to transport UIR rockets across the cosmodrome, ready for assembly, and then to the main rocket launch pad. Now with the ground vehicles out of the way, let's look at the air vehicles that the UIR's Air Force used. The transport helicopter, a very large aircraft with two rotor blades, similar to the COG's King Raven dual rotor variant seen at the end of Operation Hollow Storm in Gears 2. Due to its size, this UIR transport helicopter was able to hold a large number of soldiers and deploy them into assault campaigns or air insertion, being able to help evict Indies if a battle was lost. And this transport helicopter was much larger than the UIR's gunship, the Myrrah. And this was an attack helicopter used by the UIR's Air Force to dish out heavy damage and provide close air support. Equipped with twin heavy caliber machine guns and two rocket pods, being able to do plenty of damage against the COG's ground vehicles. Also equipped with a searchlight, and the Myrrah was heavily armoured and therefore was very durable, especially against gunfire and small arms fire. Moving on to the UIRC vehicles, they had their own battleships to counter the COG's equivalents.
Take us down! We're gonna need explosives!
Explosives? Why? That's the boat?
I never said it was in the water.
Can we have your helicopter instead?
No!
Formidable ships, possessing 3 triple-barreled naval big guns, which could provide heavy artillery bombardment on coastal cities, towns and beaches, able to contain several thousand sailors of the UIR's navy. When the COG stole and perfected the Hammer of Dawn satellite weapons, it was used against one of the UIR's battleships showcasing its devastating power, and helped lead to the UIR surrendering and therefore losing the Pendulum Wars. A sea vehicle spearheaded by the Republic of Gorasnaya was the Gorasnaya attack submarine, vanguards for the UIR Navy, specializing in sinking enemy supply in combat ships, as well as hunting enemy submarines in order to protect the UIR surface combatant ships. The Navy also had miniature suicide submarines. This was where religiously crazy Indies would carry out this suicide assignment against cog-naval vessels. The crews of the submarines would often change their mind about carrying out their assignments, but unfortunately, their vessels' hatches were welded shut to prevent escape. One of the well-known ships of the UIR Navy was the frigate, a warship being able to hold a few hundred UIR sailors and being capable of firing huge amounts of damage through ballistic cruise missiles on its intended targets through its vertical launching systems. Previously a civilian container ship to transport goods, but was later militarized, this was the UIR cargo ship. This was repurposed in order to transport troops and equipment. Now there were also some commercial and civilian vehicles manufactured and used by the UIR. Firstly, the Matador Sport, a luxury sports car brand that had global appeal within the UIR sphere of influence. The expensive car, as advertised, was powered with an octane imulsion engine, indicating high performance and fuel efficiency. A small sea vessel in the form of a fishing boat, sometimes accompanied by rowboats when fishing off the coast, essential for naval commerce and trade, and the cog also used fishing boats as well. Now the nation of Vaskar was synonymous with tourism, and one of the major tourist transportation vessels for the people of Vaskar was the Vaskari cruise ship, known to have crossed over the polar regions of Sera. And then they also had the Vaskari passenger planes, used for international travel. And then finally we have the Vaskari passenger train, transporting passengers in and out from Vaskar's many airports, and also used as scenic rides. And that, my friends, is the full lore on the UIR in Gears of War. Drop a like if you enjoyed this video, and consider subscribing if you haven't done so already. Thank you very much for watching, and a special thank you to the channel members for your support to the channel. I'm your host Abz, and as always, I will catch you guys next time.